so border agents are cutting down fences to let migrants in, all because the Biden administration is forcing them to. This is becoming a country without borders, without laws. This is the brink. And folks, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like me and you like what we do here. And if you really want more Daily Caller content, which you should over the weekend, but there were no new episodes of The Brink, well, you can subscribe to be a Daily Caller Patriot. There's a link in the description below, and there's so much great content on there. It'll keep you busy until another episode of The Brink comes out. All right, so this was wild. I don't know how many of you saw this, but Democratic New York Rep Jamal Bowman, he pulled the fire alarm on Saturday just as Congress was preparing to vote on a short-term bill to keep the government open. But what's even more rich is this ridiculous excuse that his team gave. So first, just take a look at Bowman pulling the fire alarm. And what did his spokesperson say? That apparently Bowman didn't know that pulling the fire alarm would trigger it to go off. And then he thought that the red fire alarm sign, which literally says fire on it, would open the door. The same door that he has walked through dozens, if not hundreds of times while he's been in office, if he's not using the underground tunnels that congressmen get to use. So in the words of Jake Tapper,
I'll be honest, it doesn't really make sense to me, his explanation.
And let's jump over to Kentucky and Tennessee, where a judge ruled that state laws banning puberty blockers and other so-called treatments for trans minors are reasonable restrictions. The fact that it takes a judge to step in and remind liberals that cleaving healthy breast tissue off children will never be acceptable is jarring. We are literally in a fight with those on the left who try and convince them that letting kids, some of which are young enough to believe in Santa Claus, should not be able to pump themselves full of synthetic hormones. And the worst part, in my opinion, is that we're not only trying to convince the children and the legislators, but their parents too. Reasonable adults, people are supposed to be responsible. And I think the easiest way to kind of frame this is, can a 10-year-old walk into a tattoo parlor and get a tattoo? No, because they're too young to make a permanent decision like a tattoo. But somehow, conservatives are the bigots for thinking that that same 10-year-old shouldn't be allowed to be used as a science experiment to defy the laws of nature and science. Make it make sense. And what did the ACLU say about this decision? That apparently the court ignored, quote, extensive evidence from actual medical experts. Bullshit. So-called medical experts also once said lobotomies were good. They told you smoking wasn't bad for you, said butter would kill you, and they tried to cure you by bloodletting from your feet. Right? There is no extensive evidence that these Frankenstein-like procedures on our youth is, quote, medically necessary and appropriate. Now, what the ACLU meant to say is that if you take all the opposition, all the medical research that shows us how dangerous these procedures could be, and you just throw them away, then yes, the only evidence available shows that these are life-saving treatments and that this is, necessary. A culture of lies that goes unchecked leads to instances like this.
So when I talk about being too far gone, I don't really know what else to call it. This is what I mean. This is how deep my voice is. It's gotten deeper over time, and it's settled. This is what I mean by hair loss. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps thinning. It keeps receding backwards. And I'm not exactly sure that's coming back. Those are the main things when I talk about being androgenized to a point of no return. I really don't see those being fixable. So that's when I talk about, just kind of staying how I am, regardless of how I feel. That's why, just because I don't really see me personally being able to come back from what's happened so far. So I hope that's a little explanatory. This is what happens when you give a woman testosterone. This is for 5 years. This is what happens, essentially.
But yeah, conservatives are in the wrong. And let's turn our attention over to another southern state, Texas, where Border Patrol agents were literally seen cutting barbed wire fences to let migrants in. Have a look.
Gracias. 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 Agradecido con el país.
Soy periodista. No.
Okay.
Now, that video was shot by a colleague, an excellent reporter, and a really good friend of mine, Jenny Terre, with the Daily Caller News Foundation. And what she captured should make everyone's blood boil. So while borders are, Kamala Harris is nowhere to be found, which, granted, it's kind of par for the course for her. Governor Greg Abbott had the state put up a bunch of barriers. You saw the floating barriers, you see these barbed wire fences, to try and keep migrants out. Because at this point, it is nothing short of an invasion. But the Biden administration would rather waste taxpayer dollars to sue Texas for trying to control the illegal invasion than to punish the thousands of migrants who break the law every single day. Now, Greg Abbott said the Biden administration ordered the agents to cut the barbed wire down, and I'll tell you, it's a shame because these agents are frustrated, right? That's what they told Jenny in her incredible reporting. But they have no choice but to listen to DHS, to the federal government, and take down these barriers, right? Let these migrants come through. More than 1.8 million illegal crossings have been recorded at the southern border between October 2022 and August of this year, and this is how the Biden administration wants to react. Imagine if the Biden administration used half the amount of resources that they are using to sue Texas and rather put that money towards trying and fixing the problem. What a difference that would be. But folks, that is what I'd like to call wishful thinking, because in America, our bureaucracy doesn't actually get anything done. Instead, they just pawn the problem off to someone else, right? And another phrase I really thought I would never utter, San Francisco is doing something right. So the mayor, London Breed, she announced a proposal that would require residents who want welfare benefits to get mandatory drug testing. Now, granted, a lot of the criticism that she's receiving from the right is that her proposal is, all talk and no bite. But the criticism she's receiving from the left and some of the drug users themselves, well, it's their choice to use drugs. That the proposal is actually kicking people when they're down. Look, I'll state the obvious. No one is forcing someone to use drugs, and no one is forcing them to get government aid. But if a taxpayer has to be drug tested to keep their job in order to pay into the system so that a drug addict can then go get the benefits, then the welfare recipients also need to be drug tested. One hand wipes the other. And the fact that this isn't a bipartisan proposal at a state, local, and federal level is mind-boggling to me. It's something so simple that you would think, 100 years ago, this would have been like, yeah, great, everyone's on board. And now, in 2023, you can't do that because you're bound to offend someone. Folks, we'll be back tomorrow with more on The Brink.